Once again, I have the topic of hybrid algorithm. So some of you might have seen some of these slides, so I apologize. But in essence, hybrid was something that came up in the US in the year 2011. I'm just going to kind of take you through a brief history. So as we all know, and as most of us here are comfortable with, like anti-grade wire escalation was the primary default strategy for a very long time, and then the Japanese brought up the retrogrades, and they were the pioneers there, and there were some very, very elegant retrograde techniques that were done. Then dissection re-entry came about. Then it all kind of came together about 7-8 years ago to the first hybrid strategy, and subsequently led to the hybrid community. So what is hybrid? So essentially, we look at CTOs and then say, okay, we have different approaches of opening up vessels. So you have anti-grade wire escalation, you have retrograde wire escalation, you have anti-grade dissection re-entry, and retrograde dissection re-entry. And hybrid was an attempt to standardize, protocolize the whole thing and see how do we make this process and the 4 different approaches, how do we get to it in a systematic manner? And the key is, it's not like, oh, this is an ADR case, or this is a retrograde case. It's about being, having an option A, B, C, if there are options in a particular case. The other thing that was done in hybrid was an attempt to try and standardize wiring. So historically, if you look at it, and for very experienced operators, this slide is kind of pointless because people can do certain things with certain wires which most newer operators cannot. So there was an attempt to try and see, okay, what works for, let's say, 90-95% for the operators. So there was an attempt to try and standardize wires. Why? Because you can teach newer operators. The learning curve is not as steep. It helps manage inventory better, and obviously helps with the efficiency of the procedure. And why did we need this? Because complex anatomy needs multiple options. And however good you are with wiring, I know this is a busy slide, but in essence, what this slide shows is this. If you look at overall outcomes, like parallel wiring works in about 50% of the cases. IBIS guided wiring maybe a little bit better, about 60% at best. And when you are dealing with complex anatomy, that is the JCTO scores 3, 4, 5s, anti-grade wire escalation does not work very well. Zeros and ones, it works really, really well. So what works in the more complex CTOs? Retrogrades work, so more than a third of the patients in higher JCTO scores, you end up doing retrogrades, and about 25% is ADR. This is from the registry in the States. And I do want to make a point that, as you guys can see, even in the hands of experts, retrogrades don't always work. This is data from our Japanese colleagues from a few years ago, where you see that in a primary retrograde approach, sometimes you can't wire the collateral, sometimes you can't get the microcatheter across, and sometimes you can't finish a reverse card. So in about 25 to 30% of the cases where you say, I'm going to go retrograde, that's not an option for you. And this is data from Japan in 2016 that was published. Once again, the number is kind of similar. It's about a 30% failure rate overall. And it's not that the rest of the world does any better. This is data from the US, incidentally, where the number again is about 25 to 30%. You go primary retrograde, you end up failing. Likewise in the UK, it's about 25%. So the point I'm trying to make is that even in the hands of experts, you might not be able to do retrograde in about 25% of the patients. And when you take on really dangerous epicardials and you are relatively new to retrogrades, that's a recipe for disaster. So does this mean ADR works every time? Not really. Works about, let's say, 75-80% of the time. Once again, there are failure modalities for anti-grade dissection re-entry. So the point I'm trying to make, if at all I'm saying anything, is that there is no one solution for CTO PCI, and every approach has a failure mode. The chance of failure is higher as you're dealing with the higher JCTOs. So the good news is that the more options you have in a case, the more likely you're to succeed, because I might fail every other way, but I just got to get it one way. So let's switch gears and see what limits adoption of CTO PCI, and the other reason why hybrid really came into being. One is a lot of us don't take on CTO. We're not sure we're going to be able to deliver the goods, right? Definitely these are more complex lesions and with a higher potential complication rate, so inherently we have a bias against doing them, and we find reasons not to. And of course, we have trials that come up with data where sometimes I'm like, well, CTO PCR is useless. Some say, well, maybe useful, whatever. So there's a lot of confusion about indication itself. In any case, there are patients that we all know have CTOs and are very symptomatic on good medical therapy where indication is not an issue. So how do we come up with a solution for these? And there are multiple ways of learning CTOs. You can end up, if for some reason you end up doing 2,000 CTOs on your own, you're somehow going to get good at it. It just happens. But those days are gone. No one's going to send you CTOs left, right, and center and let you get better. So a structured approach will definitely make the learning curve a lot easier.
Dr. Arun, make it short.
I'm sorry?
You didn't make it big short. We have another 2 speakers.
Okay, so I got 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I got 5 minutes. Thanks. So, in essence, hybrid is not a Western thing. There are no rules. It's not a club, more of a community. So what are the key concepts now? So we kind of went over the rationale. Don't do ad hoc CTOs. If you have prior attempts or prior films, please study them. And then really this is the money, right? So there are 4 cardinal questions for hybrid. 1, do you know where the proximal cap is? So that's the first thing. So how do you operationalize this question? If you are confident of taking a stiff wire like your Conquest Pro 12 and a microcatheter and sticking into what you believe is the proximal cap, then it's not ambiguous to you. If you're not sure, then it's ambiguous. Second question, how is the reentry zone? A good reentry zone is defined by 2 criteria, essentially. 1, you don't want it at a bifurcation, and secondly, you want it to be relatively disease-free. Number 3, interventional collaterals. Now, yeah, there are various classifications for collaterals, but ultimately the question is, can you wire this safely and deliver the goods? If you can, it's an interventional collateral for you, and if you can't, then it's not an interventional collateral for you. And the 4th question is, how long is the lesion? And it's kind of an arbitrary number that came up actually from data from Japan, but is it a long lesion or is it not a long lesion, right? So these 4 questions are going to help you determine strategy. Now, I'm not going to go into the individual angiograms here, but in essence, you should do bilateral angiograms, and then at least in your mind, if you're not going to write it down, answer the 4 questions, and then that will help you determine your strategy. And in essence, this is the hybrid algorithm. So bilateral angiogram, and then if you have a clear proximal cap and a good target, you're going to start antegrade. The answer is no to either, preferentially go retrograde. Now, if it's a lesion that you can wire efficiently, start off with wire escalation, whether it's antegrade or retrograde. Now, whether it be a long lesion, whether it's because of tortuosity or calcium, and you think you can't wire it efficiently, then just accept that you're going to go subintimal and try and re-enter. So, antegrade dissection re-entry essentially has become crossbar stingray, although we just saw a presentation on wire-based re-entry. Retrograde dissection re-entry is some form of reverse guard. And the key is if one of these strategies doesn't work, switch strategies. And so, in summary, like hybrid essentially is a systematic way of adopting the 4 strategies, and the sequence of which is based both on what is likely to succeed, what is safe, and also switching from one strategy to another when something doesn't work. So to reiterate, the 3 initial questions, right? Proximal cap, the target, and the collaterals are going to help you determine initial directionality. And how efficiently you're going to wire it will determine if you're going to try and wire it or if you're going to go subintimal and re-enter. And obviously there are algorithms within algorithms, so in the interest of time I'm going to skim over this. You can run into myriad problems during CTO PCI, and there are solutions to each of these. So for example, this is a problem of an impenetrable cap. So again, in the interest of time I'm going to just skim over this. But you can do base, you can do scratch and go, etc. when you can't penetrate the cap. And you could Carlino it, or like basically hydraulically dissect an industry. You could use laser, sit on the cap, and then do it. And, or you could bail out and go retrograde. I'll finally begin the plane. So how does this all come together? So I got a minute and 20 seconds. I'm just going to go over this case briefly. So this is a patient that got referred to back in the States when I was there. So we had essentially had 3 CTOs. So you have a CERC CTO, RCA CTO, and LAD CTO. And this patient was turned on for surgery in 2 hospitals, one on the outside and also in our place. So it's done on the impella because the patient had really low EF and all myocardial territories were viable. So initial attempt, RCA wire didn't work, but we had a great retrograde option, so ended up doing it retrograde, ended up being a straightforward retrograde wire escalation. Given that the patient already had impella and we used very little contrast and radiation, went ahead with the CERC, again initial attempt, wire clearly subintimal as you can see in the second movie run, put in a Stingray, stick and swap, and ended up stenting that. And the third vessel, which is LAD, was also done in the same setting. This ended up just being a wire escalation case. So the reason I'm showing this case is that when you have multiple options, you can be pretty efficient. And if you are comfortable with antegrade wire escalation, retrogrades, and dissection reentry antegrade, then you truly have hybrid skills and your chance of success is pretty high. And this essentially just means that go in a systematic manner. Be really good at antegrade wire escalation before you venture into the other strategies. And the key points, I'm going to summarize this. Know that nothing works every time. Everything has strengths, weaknesses. Get comfortable and familiar with various choices that you have. Don't get stuck into any one device or saying, okay, this is the best microcatheter. There is no perfect solution for everything in CTO-PCI. And the other, I think, fundamental concept is that we don't really try and stay intraluminal all the time. We want to stay in the vessel architecture. And it doesn't really matter if you're true lumen or not, because we have reproducible and ways of re-entering the true lumen. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Win. We can go for the last talk by Dr. Nakamura.
Show you 3 very interesting non-stamped CTO case. Actually, this is a case of no retrograde option and antegrade wiring. This is the case. You can see this is a very complex left main case, very serious nonsense of circular option, actually no stamp or CTO, and no retrograde option. So, no way, I need to do the antegrade. Actually, this case, you can see this. If you do the ILAC, we can see clearly, happily we can see clearly entry point of the LED CTO. So because of the, if we have a narrow in the left main bifurcation area, we have a chance to find out the entry point of CTO. Actually, usually if we have a big space of left main to circle, it's very difficult to find out the entry point of CTO. But in this kind of case, looks very, ugly, looks very difficult. But for us, this is a very big chance of to find out the entry point. If you find out the entry point easy, just advance in the guardian, softly, appropriately, and then we can get a big, nice tunnel. Okay. So if you have a nano in the left main, you have a chance to see the non-stamp LED CTO. And the second case is another case of non-stamp LED CTO. This is a case of no retrogression, no eyebrow option, like without navigator torch. For register CT guided guideline, this is the case. Non-stamp LED CTO. Even if you want to see the eyebrows with the side branch, actually we cannot see any entry point of the LED CTO by the eyelash. So this kind of case, we sometimes use this kind of procedure. Put the image of the coronary CT co-register just beside the shine, and then advance in the guide wire. Of course, using a 290-degree different view, and then wire advance very slowly, and then finally get the digital lumen like this. This is the final. Just want to say careful observation of coronary CT, like for register CT image, to easy to find out the congestion of the coronary artery.
What wire did you use for this? What wire, guide wire for this?
This actually, currently we use Guyana always. So this is the case of until rewiring, the case of LDCTO. This is the case of this is the final case. Actually. The LDCTO, very complex, looks like a very complex LED proximal part. And it looks like anti-electoral, but this is a really CTO, and this is the fifth attempt of CTO. This patient is a Chinese patient, very rich patient. Actually comes to my hospital. And this is a no-letter erosion. And I'm professional. I can actually, the entry point or the CTO is a very tricky curve, and the wire is going. And then now the wire is going to the distal. And then using a parallel wire technique, the point is very close. So my wire is very close to the distal lumen. At that time, what I did is change the confianza to puncture in the distal part of the LED. And then finally, I got the lumen or just the distal part. But in this stage, if you implant a stent in the proximal part or the middle part, we lose a septal branch, which is the most important to keep the ejection function of the patient. So in this stage, change the IVAS-guided approach to wiring. Left panel show the actually the wire is a floating in the first lumen, and the right panel show so finally, now wire is floating. Now wire is in. But actually, this is just a schema. So we need to put IVAS just to deviate it through to a force. This is the site. And then maybe we can see the IVAS like this. And then we need to do it. We want to do it like this. And then we can confirm by the IVAS. This is the IVAS guided approach. Of course, this is not the automatic, need a very technique. And after that, implanted the stent. And this is the diameter. In case of the IVAS-guided approach, this is the final option of our CTO procedure. This is the guide wire into the make sure to enter in the force to remain with actually gut feeling. So actually this is not easy. This is very difficult, and this is very, need a sophisticated technique. One of the most difficult ones. And if you can understand this, and if you can do this, don't need to come here, because this is the most difficult one. And finally, if you have a very difficult CTO case, this is my recommendation. You have to tell yourself, I can do it, I can do it. And in case of CTO case very seriously, maybe God always watch you. If you do so, go to your certainly send me a gift of the success. But go in the vacation and call me. I'm professional CTO. But no guarantee of success.
Thank you, Dr. Nakamura. So we will wind up this session because your light is important. Thank you for the excellent talks to all speakers. Thank you.
May I thank the chairpersons and the speakers of this